Hello, YouTube. It's the Powerbotch Podcast. We here at the Powerbotch Podcast talk a lot about athletic girth, about big beefy men, or like Vince McMahon likes them, big and sweaty. There is a special place for big men in wrestling today, so it feels like. But back then, in the olden days of wrestling, in the carny days of wrestling maybe, it was the land of the giants with men towering the ring post to impose their towering might. I don't know. We're going to talk about big men in wrestling.
Big men in wrestling. So we're for those who love a bit of the athletic girth, well, fire up your grill. We're going to slab some of them to you for you. You know what I'm saying? Get seasoned. Get your salt. Get your pepper. We're going to get you grilled. Oh, yes. Big man in wrestling has been obviously a factor as long as we've known it. But we kind of, based on the notes that you very kindly drew up, Fried, it's broken into multiple eras, sections, very defining aspects of what we could see are the big men of wrestling and what defines their...
Yeah.
Essentially, their runs or their rise to prominence or when they were utilized. There's core themes to how we look at big men.
I feel like the beginnings, we can't ignore the carny origins of wrestling. You know, kind of the freak show factor. It's not nice to look at it this way, but like if you look at wrestling in the 70s, 60s, like you have those monstrous personalities. That's the really carny thing, the freak show effect. Yeah, you come to see those spectacles. Guys like a haystack Calhoun, for example, who's towering giant. He's as wide as he is tall, and it's you know if you go there live to watch a match, this is pre-television era for most promotions. You know, you're live there in the audience. You see this behemoth of a man, and because you're live there, you get the comparison. It's impressive as fuck. Now I did say the F word. It's impressive as heck.
Nah, just to get going, it's impressive as fuck. But who would you say defined the era of the Carney Giants, though? Like, who in the top of your head would be the era of the Carney Giant?
I mean, there are a lot of names that come to mind, like Gorilla Monsoon, for example, George the Animal Steel. But if we are talking about giants, the giant of giants, it's probably Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant, who, based on the notes that you very kindly provided as well, was about over 2 meters and 13 centimeters. So, you know, to say the least, not a short man, to say the least, you know? Very, very feckin' tall. I'm just going to, for those who maybe work on the idea of feet to meters, I'm just going to give you an indication of what that is. So we're talking, 7 foot, 7, let me just double check here. I've got my metrics backwards because of course I do. There we go.
Should be 7 foot 4 inches or something like that, shouldn't it?
7 foot 4 inches, yeah. So, yeah, just about.
Did I get that right?
7 foot according to the calculator. 4 inches has been left off, and I don't know why.
Huh. I don't know. In my head, Undertaker was 7'2". Maybe.
Gotta bear in mind though, WWE are very good at slightly inflating the figures because this was a carny tactic, guys.
Yeah,
they would sometimes inflate the figure to make you then be in more awe of them. But Andre the Giant,
I think you can get away with inflating the figures if you televise it, because you have to emphasize how tall they are on commentary if you're not live in attendance anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those ones where you are trying to get these larger than life figures. You're trying to draw a git. How you draw a git? Well, you then tell people about these monstrous, diabolically like large people that no one has ever seen before, and that's the way it's done. It's usually by like inflating certain things. Like in Vince's House of Hard Hustles, you do have a lot of kind of lies about how many people they've seated and whatnot, but you know, it happens. beyond Andre the Giant, though, you did talk about some other people. You had like Gorilla Monsoon and whatnot in there. Some people may not even seen Gorilla Monsoon on TV outside of the commentary capacity, but he was a wrestler before. That was a good shout.
I mean, a couple of other noticeable names from this era, maybe Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, a Giant Baba, if we want to go to Japan, Antonio Inoki, probably one of the most important Japanese wrestlers, Abdullah the Butcher, Earthquake, One Man Gang, Bruiser Brody, Big Boss Man, Black Chick Mulligan. List goes on and on about notable big man. But of course, there are other really, really important big people in this kind of era. We're now in the 80s, approaching the 90s. Hulk Hogan,
yeah. He
in comparison to Andre the Giant, kind of a small guy, ain't he?
yeah, like a really small guy. Like when you look at it, like you look at WrestleMania 3, which is kind of like the big time when they clash. Like they fought each other before, but like at WrestleMania 3, that was like the big clash. Like, could Hulk Hogan lift Andre the Giant? He did, but it's one of those ones where spoiler for anyone who hasn't watched that 30-year-old pay-per-view. But you know, even then, like, Hulk Hogan was a massive man, and he was the face of WWE for the whole golden period. He came in. Now, if you thought Andre the Giant was big, and you thought Andre the Giant was big, he was around 7 foot. He was in the 7 foot mark. Hogan comes in at the 6'3" mark, or the 1 meter and 93 centimeters mark. Now, just to give you perspective there, if we're looking at this from an inch perspective, he was about a good 7 or 8 inches shorter than Andre the Giant. Now, if you can imagine that there, that is a tower above you. If you have someone who's 7 or 8 inches above you, that is someone who's towering above you. And Hulk Hogan was not a short man.
Yes.
6'3" is not short.
Dude, in meters, he's 1 meter 93. And I learned one thing upon researching. If you think about a big man and you don't know how tall he is, guess 1 meter 93. Because most of the times they are, honestly. Like, a lot of people that are not, I didn't put down on the list, they are 1 meter 93. And I didn't note them down because now I know. Like, everyone is 1 meter 93.
I'm noticing this here. I've noticed it because, like, if I was to look at the list you collated, you have the Triple H is 1 meter 93, the Randy Orton's 1 meter 93, the Rock's 1 meter 93, and we haven't even got into that era yet. But like that is, and they're still big guys, but like that is a commonality of that there. But like we are talking about the initial TV era, and
maybe we should give a comparison because, like, if Hulk Hogan is the big guy, Andre the Giant is the giant. What's the normal guy? Normal guy in this era? Maybe Ric Flair, you know, or Ric Flair, who's 1 meter 80. That should be around 6 feet, and his build is 110 kilos. If you compare him to Hulk Hogan, whose build is 125 kilos, that's 275 pounds compared to 242 pounds. Ric Flair doesn't weigh 110 kilos in his prime.
No, he does not. In fact, he's quite. At some points, he was quite lean during his WCW NWA run. So it's like you kind of looking at that and going like, how is that? No, really?
They massage the figures a little bit.
They maybe has got a little bit of motion. You know what I'm saying?
Some creative bookkeeping there.
Yeah. And that's interesting as well because it shows the dichotomy during the TV era of what the booking styles were. You had the Land of the Giants, WWE, and that's what it was. It was the Land of the Giants versus old school Southern wrestling of the WCW, and you can tell that there is a when it comes to big men in wrestling, you can see where those styles very much diverge because, again, McMahon wanted this larger-than-life spectacle, the superheroes in the ring.
Yeah.
Where WCW is the ultimate athlete, the the catch specialist, the working man's wrestler, the real man's wrestler, and that's the key difference when we talk about these giants, was this divergence.
Yeah, and that's when I outlined the segment. The second step is televised era, and my thought is the size of the wrestler doesn't really translate that well over the television. It works really well when you're live there, but if it's not the size, the spectacle that you get in a televised show, the work becomes a little bit more important, a little bit more of the in-ring style. And that's kind of, what you've mentioned. The WCW was widely considered to have the better in-ring product, at least for a time.
Yeah, and that's kind of how those two houses really defined themselves,
Yeah.
But we do see that change a little bit as we get into the next era that you've very nicely put on the documents, which is we see the impressive big men. And the reason why this happens is that there was a little bit of a lawsuit somewhere, maybe a court case, maybe an injunction, maybe some sort of, I don't know, criminal investigation to the use of some substances in the House of McMahon, and there had to be a greater focus on big men, but big men who could still be impressive in the ring, because you can't have the jacked up athletic girthy beef.
Well, on the other hand, they did ramp up their really, wrestlers with a lot of volume, They couldn't beef up with bench pressing, but they could still build up an impressive belly.
Well, could you give us some examples of that there?
Well, look no further than world champion Yokozuna.
Yes, Yokozuna, the fabled Japanese Samoan, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah.
He was a Samoan wrestler who was given a wonderfully, completely, a polar opposite gimmick of a Japanese sumo wrestler.
Yeah.
Work that out.
He's as tall as Hulk Hogan, but he's more than twice his weight. That's...
And it shows, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's almost 3 times his weight. And WWE brought in other unimpressive guys. Giant Gonzalez, for example, the tall. I think he was a basketball player before this.
Yes, he was.
His build is 2 meters 28. That's 20 centimeters taller than the Undertaker. I don't know if I buy that.
So, I mean, he's about 7'4" in feet, and we know that the Big Show at his prime was booked at 7'2", so he'd be 2 inches bigger than the Big Show.
I think 2 meters 28 is closer to 8 feet almost, or maybe 7'10".
Really?
Yeah.
According to Google, it's not. That's weird.
Dude, I'm doing conversions in my head. Maybe I'm off, but it's freak show tall. He must have been one of the tallest humans ever if he was legit that tall.
Yeah,
but we're getting off the mark. The important thing is he was a really tall dude, not really muscular. That's why they put this bodysuit on him with painted muscles, and he had probably Undertaker's worst Wrestlemania match.
Yeah, in fact, I'm near sure I remember hearing somewhere that Undertaker left WCW and was so thankful he didn't have to work with Giant Gonzalez. And then Giant Gonzalez followed him to WWE.
Yeah. But that brings us to a guy who could move. Giant Gonzalez, stiff as a board, couldn't move, at all. The Undertaker, impressive stuff of flying clotheslines, flying shoulder tackles, the old school, walking a tightrope on the top rope. And he was huge guy.
Yeah.
Impressive, right?
Yeah, Undertaker, we're talking he wasn't that short. According to the calculation here, he was 6'8". He was a tall boy. He was substantially taller than Hogan. Taller than Hogan.
Yeah, 15 centimeters. That's 6 inches taller.
Yeah, which is just ludicrous. Like, I mean, he wasn't that far off Andre's height technically.
Yeah, 2 inches.
Like crazy. But he wasn't like Andre, who used, like, Andre was all about using his mass, and like Andre was the king of the battle royale because no one could put him out, and he would just chuck people, and he was like this force, where Undertaker was this relatively tall man. He had enough muscle on him, but not too much. But he was very very versatile. He was very quick. He was just a unique entity in a time where men at that caliber, like you said, were just big, athletic, girthy beasts.
I mean, we should mention the counterpart to Yokozuna, maybe, which could be said. Vader is a rather round-shaped man who could move like a beast. Like, he is the proto Keith Lee.
Yes, that's a brilliant way to call it. He is literally the foundation of what Keith Lee is made of. Yeah. He had a phenomenal run in New Japan, which led to him being signed to WCW, which then also led him being signed by WWE, arguably where he done his worst work. But even after like his terrible bookings in WWE, he was still able to go back to Japan and make a hell of a living. Like he was the first ever Gaijin IWGP heavyweight champion. That tells you something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean he was a fantastic worker in the ring. Did great character work. Looking at the New Japan matches, the entrance with the big mask and stuff, he looked like a proper monster. Awesome.
He was such a monster that his match with Antonio Inoki, if I remember correctly, caused a riot.
Yeah.
I think it was Kazuna Hall. Maybe it wasn't Kazuna Hall, but it ended up making sure that New Japan did not have any bookings in that hall for, I think, 2 or 3 years after it. It was insane.
Yeah. Maybe one more big man from this kind of era who really could go in the ring, Bambam Bigelow. We should mention him.
Oh yeah, definitely Bambam Bigelow. Like he was good. He was maybe underrated, if you ask me.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the matches that most people bring up to showcase him is his his King of the Ring match with Bret Hart. And I did actually rewatch it this week in preparation. And the crowd goes wild. Like, he climbs the top rope, this diving headbutt, a man of his size, just climbing the turnbuckle, the crowd explodes. It's amazing.
Such a great talent. Sadly, I wouldn't say underutilized, because he did have some big WrestleMania matches. Like he had the match of Fridge, remember the linebacker from the NFL team.
Oh Christ, I remember.
Yeah, but they trusted him enough because he was a good enough worker to get him through that match.
Yeah.
It's just, but he just maybe didn't get the right rub. He got a rub, but just not the right rub he probably deserved. Should we go on to the next one? Should we talk about our next section?
Yeah. We're early 90s, mid 90s, the rise of the smaller guys who are actually still normal sized guys. We've got in WWE our Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, for example.
Yeah, we have like that, and then again that's a reaction to the criminal court case that's alleged against McMahon. That's true.
Yeah. Just to give a comparison out, those are both about 1 meter 85. That's 6'1" about, and 103 kilograms. That's Shawn Michaels. That's 227 pounds. That's kind of that's kind of still taller than average in those times, but that was your main event scene for a while. Of course, you still had your big guys, your Scott Hall, your Kevin Nash, and stuff like that.
But there was like more of a focus on those more even though they're quite tall and quite big guys, almost more relatable is maybe the term I want to use. Like, if he's like a type of version that we would say is more obtainable.
I mean, what's the impressive thing here is the main event has opened up to small guys, big air quotes.
Yeah, because like we have it was the Brett versus Shawn at WrestleMania, and then you had the 2 out of 3 falls match as well, and then you have pretty much like Brett running with that belt for a while, like quite a bit of time, and then you had the ill-fated Yokozuna step in where he takes the belt and then he loses it to Hulk Hogan.
Oh, so bad.
And it's kind of like, can you go away, Hulk Hogan? And he did. He went over to WCW. But then we have like Brett come back again and run with the belt for a while, and then it goes over to Shawn Michaels, and you have that more focus on not the average size sort of wrestler, but tall men who just are more relatable.
Yeah, and that's kind of the important step that in the mainstream now, the quote-unquote smaller guys can now become main eventers. Because while all this is going on in the big land of the giants in WWE, the Indies, Mexico, Japan, you've got a lot of smaller guys who are working on their styles, who are developing their skills in the ring.
Sorry, go
please.
ahead.
No, please.
That then brings in the counter sort of culture of what we know what wrestling is, because obviously if Mexico and Japan are, with these smaller guys, you can do a lot more interesting things. Which brings us to then what I would say WCW kind of starts kind of like introducing into the mainstream.
Yeah. Well, actually, ECW and WCW was, hey, that's a cool idea. I'll have this guy and have this guy.
I very carefully picked my words, though. I said mainstream. ECW wasn't mainstream.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. WCW introduces the cruiserweights. Yeah. They did see guys like Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, all of those, Juventud Guerrera,
Psychosis.
Who else?
Psychosis.
Rey Mysterio, of course.
There's a few more.
Super Crazy.
The
FBI.
Yes. God, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Tajiri, fucking Ultimo Dragon. You could go on for days.
Yeah. And like those guys regularly gave the best performance of the night, the best rated matches and stuff like that.
Yeah, to the point where people like Scott Hall were like, how do I follow that?
Yeah. But at the same time, this was kind of the era in which WCW has poached all the other big guys from WWE, and now their main event was overcrowded by the Outsiders, by Hulk Hogan, by Randy Savage, and everyone else.
Which is like almost reminiscent of what's happening to WWE today, because they've poached everyone, and now they don't know what to do with half of these people. It's almost like we have it happening again, like in parallel, and they haven't learned the lesson that they taught the other company. They've just decided to ill-fatedly just do the same thing. But it is this change, this complete sort of redesigning of what your actual undercard is and your mid-card is, that ends up being the biggest sweeping change to wrestling in any sort of era. Like this is the way it pays forward, is that we now see the luchador style, we start seeing the strong style of Japan coming in, the catch coming back with the English style and the European style. We're not seeing big man wrestling anymore. We are still seeing them, but they're also being kind of shown up by very technical wrestling through all these styles. And also to the extent some spot fests as well.
Yeah.
But this is obviously, and as I said before, more seen in WCW's Cruiserweight division, because they would always, and this is what Dynamite do today, because Dynamite's smart. They always started their pay-per-views off and their shows off with a white-hot match in the Cruiserweights, because it got the crowd excited, it got everyone interested, it got everyone lit. And then they would go into the more showmanship style matches, is the nice way I'll put it, for WCW.
Yeah. And like there's the rise of the smaller guys. A terrible movie. Maybe those Sharknado guys are interested.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't. I don't want to lie. Yeah, but let's get closer to the modern era. The more smaller guys, the higher percentage of the smaller guys in the promotion, the more impressive the big guys suddenly become. Because suddenly the big guys stand out. If you only have tall guys on TV, how can you tell that they're tall? You put Finkel besides them. Okay, if you don't have a Finkel and you actually want a wrestling match, what do? Now you have like a lot of normal sized wrestlers, and suddenly a 2-meter guy stands out.
Yeah. And it's really smart as well, because it now makes for and which is now sort of a common trope, but the David and Goliath match now looks like an actual David and Goliath match.
Yeah. And how effective this is, you can see in AEW, like the shift in perspective. Like, for example, take Wardlow. Impressive tall guy, ain't he?
Mm-hmm. Massively.
Did you know that Wardlow and I are about the same height?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Is that because they've just put him right beside MJF? And so his sort of shorter nature makes Wardlow look bigger? Is that the trick there? I imagine it is.
He's on the taller side of the AEW roster, but he's a 1.88 m. That should be 6'2.5", between 6'2" and 6'3".
Yeah.
Yeah. He's on the taller side. If you're wondering, Lance Archer is the tallest guy in AEW with 2'3". That's 6'5", maybe.
Yeah, but 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah. And Luchasaurus, second tallest guy.
What's he coming in at?
Oh, sorry, Luke Harper, second tallest guy.
Oh, Luke Harper. Luke Harper
is an inch smaller than.
So maybe about 5 foot or 6'5", 5'5". Jesus Christ, 6'5" then.
Yeah, and a Luchasaurus is another inch smaller than Lance Archer,
6'4"?
and not Lance Archer than Luke Harper.
Right. Okay. So even the giants in AEW were not even as giant as some of the people 10 years ago.
Then the other guys, Dustin Rhodes, Billy Gunn, those are in the 1.93 m club. You're 6'4", 6'5", 6'5".
Yeah, but I say 6'4", 6'5", yeah.
Yeah.
So it's and the thing as well, Dustin's always has portrayed quite a tall figure as well. But you wouldn't think they were in the cut-in distance of the likes of Luchasaurus, because again, I guess it's perspective, and AEW and modern day wrestling has done it really well, where they'll put these guys beside quite short people, because I guess Luchasaurus has the biggest advantage here, because if he's tag teaming with with Jungle Boy, he looks really tall. If he's tag teaming with Marco Stunt, he looks like a giant.
Yeah. And it's I don't think they've ever. No, basically every time he fights someone, there are smaller guys in the team. There's not a team of bigger guys.
Yeah,
he's faced off with the big guys. There are always smaller guys on the opponent's team. He can still tower over them. He can still overpower them. And it's how many people did we name now? Five big guys in AEW in a very stacked roster of 50 capable guys. And those 5 guys can stand out, and that's the impressive thing.
And that comes with a really interesting sort of point, because we did talk about the cruiserweights as well. They're not just big guys. These big guys also do incredibly death-defying things, like the flexibility. Like when Luchasaurus does his choke slam into his shooting star press, or not shooting star press, like a moonsault, yeah, like a standing moonsault. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah, he's impressive. Lance Archer is impressive.
Lance Archer is really impressive. Yeah, like Adam Page is probably not that short, and he does a standing shooting star press.
Yeah.
Like,
dude, Lance Archer, when I first saw him in the mid-2000s, when he was still known as Lance Hoyt, I was like, holy freaking frick, that's the most athletic big man I've ever seen. And he was younger back then. He could still do more. He's still impressive, and it was a great thing in TNA. He was wrestling amongst smaller guys still, because he was the tall guy in the X division,
Oh my god. I was gonna say him in the X division must have been like Andre the Giant amongst like literally anyone from today's roster. That must have been insane. But
those guys blew my mind,
Yeah, like I could imagine like the X division was like insanely flexible, probably the wrong term, but like insanely like capable of amazing athletic stunts. And then you got Lance Archer, who's doing almost the same stuff and keeping up with them and just leaping over ropes and through ropes and things. You're like, Jesus Christ. But that doesn't mean we're not falling afoul of some of the tall men, lesser known and desirable attributes in the modern age of wrestling. Case in point of Mr. Greg Holly, who is just, the Greg Holly is probably this generation, or maybe we're just passed into a new generation, but his generation's Giant Gonzalez. Like the Greg Holly was bloody massive, but he could not move to save his life. He was stiff. He was so stiff. Like his back was clearly just not healthy. And Greg Holly, he comes in at 2 meters 16 centimeters. Like if we put that into feet, that's about 7 foot odds, but he couldn't move. He was so stiff and so rigid. And then he beat the Undertaker clean, and that was weird.
And it wasn't even the one-off freak show. No, they kept him around for a long time.
Yeah, they kind of got smart after a while and went, "We'll just make him comedy," and didn't make him actually destroying talent and burying talent with him. They could have, but they didn't, thank God.
They did do this for a long time, though. His destructive run, it felt like an eternity. Probably was 2 years, maybe.
Yeah, but thankfully the people he destroyed were almost like Teflon to him. Like Undertaker could take that loss and still be the Undertaker, if you know what I mean. But it does show that even in the modern era, we are still kind of susceptible to these big man gimmicks that just don't pay off.
Let's maybe look at the other side of the big man gimmicks in modern WWE. Take a look at Jinder Mahal. I mean, he's not that tall, but he took a break. He beefed up. I have a world title.
Yeah,
it still holds weight. Putting on weight in the WWE.
True. There's still the old adage of Vince McMahon, those big sweaty men, is still there. It's still very much there, And he also does like the big sweaty fat man. I mean, let's look at Otis here. Otis was given a Money in the Bank briefcase that he still has yet to use, and he's arguably probably much like the sort of, I would describe him on the more Bambam Bigelow, Vader side of things, maybe even going towards Yokozuna in his way his weight holds. Like he's not like maybe like Keith Lee, who'd be more like the Vader.
Yeah.
But he's definitely a man who holds weight in a different way, but has still been given some sort of a push.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll take the Viking Raiders.
Oh
They're
yeah,
probably more your Bambam Bigelow.
that's true. That's fair. That's like a tag team of Bam Bigelows.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because while we definitely have evolved for the years from like the golden age and the non-TV era, there is still definitely, and it's probably very much a Vince directive, but there is still a lot of those holdovers in what we see from big men. We're just lucky that through the evolution, and I think the cruiserweight division has a lot to be given credit for here. It's forced these big giants to become nimble giants, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes forward, because the modern day criticism of wrestling is that there's too much flips. Do we see these big men maybe come back in and show a more brute force approach going into the 2020s, or do we see these big men do even more flips and shatter our expectations even more? And I'm really quite keen to see how this works, because the evolution of the big man is always going to be inside wrestling. There'll never not be a day where a big man's not wrestling.
Yeah, for sure.